Good day to Dr. Vasanti Anak Perempuan Subramaniam, the lecturer for subject Language Assessment in the Primary ESL Classroom. I am Izati Ikisari binti Kushairi, and today I'm going to present the last task, which is task 3 of my coursework. So, I am requested to present a 30 minutes oral presentation on the assessment issue of assessment in the 21st century in the primary language classroom context. So, before I continue with my presentation, I would like to inform you that the content of my presentation, I will start with an introduction, and I will move on to the issue of assessment in the 21st century in the primary language classroom context and how to deal with the situation. And I will end the presentation with a conclusion. So, before I start, when we talk about 21st century assessment, basically 21st century assessment is about teaching students how to think, and the 21st century skills that a teacher need to develop in their students are how to think creatively and critically, and at the same time student must be able to communicate the idea and able to develop their idea effectively. Apart from that, student also there is a need for student to be able to collaborate among themselves and becoming a good team member or becoming a good team leader. So in 21st century assessment, there are many types of assessment that can be done. Example, role play, group exercise, or situated judgment test. All these type of assessment contribute to polish or contribute develop the four C of 21st century skill, which are critical thinking, creativity, and also collaboration. However, in order to develop a good 21st century assessment among primary language students, there are some issues that teachers need to face and need to find ways to deal with this certain issue. So, I able to identify at least 5 issues of the assessment in the 21st century in the primary language classroom context. The first issue is personalization. Second issue is technology. Third issue is classroom management. Fourth issue is co-curriculum. And the last issue is global awareness. So, I will explain in further details each of these issue as I move forward in my presentation. Let's start with the first issue, which is personalization. Okay, as you see, nowadays the teaching method that one size fits all is no more relevant because nowadays teacher are demand to focus on different styles of learner where learner are not forced to learn beyond their own understanding. So teacher need to adjust their way of teaching according to the learning style of each student in the class. That is how teacher are expected to personalize their method of teaching and their method of assessment. As a result, teachers need to focus on changing or focus on analysis on their teaching methodology and teaching assessment, where this teaching assessment and this teaching methodology need to focus on student-centered learning compared to teacher-centered learning. However, the issues here when all these different various type of learning style need to be clubbed together under one classroom into a very fixed period of time. Usually in a primary school, we have only 1 hour per session. It become an issue for teacher to deal with this type of situation. Moving on, in order to deal with personalization issue, teacher need to be very clear in order to identify the learning style of their students, where teacher need to observe their students in the real time during the class session. It can be done by doing the psychological assessment or general assessment, such as listening skill, speaking skill, writing skill, and reading skill. Once teacher able to identify clearly students' learning style, they will do a follow-up on the planning where teacher can prioritize the learning plan that will focus on the personalization of the primary language classroom. And this approach is guaranteed and effective implementation. Okay, that is the first issue, personalization. Now, let me move on to the second issue, which is technology, making the right use of technology. As we know that digital or digitalization induction in the education is not just about bringing computer into the classroom or giving the digital homework. That is not about it using of technology, but the making the right use of technology in the classroom, it required adaptation from teacher to students. Both teacher and student need to adapt. There are vast of platform, software, application that teacher and student need to master. For instance, flip learning, mobile learning, AI-based decision making, data management, e-learning, visual learning, animation, digital assessment, record keeping. And the list can keep on and on and on. So due to this long list of technology that one have to master, teacher may become overwhelmed. And to find the accurate content from these many sources of information is not easy. In order to tackle this situation, teacher need to plan their strategy well in advance, where they should have a very clear picture of the goal for the year. And teacher also need to very firm in decide which form of digitalization or technology that may best meet the students' needs. In order, when a teacher have this type of decision, a strong decision about which platform they want to use, the job may become easier and teacher able to get a precise picture of students' profile, and this is one of the most When teacher able to get a precise picture of students' profile, um, so teacher able to identify the most relevant approaches based on the digitalization platform that the teacher used towards the student. And this required teacher to analyze carefully for the best option of platform in the educational technology to use to apply in order to conduct the 21st century assessment to primary language classroom. Okay, this is the second issue. So let me move on to the third issue, which is the class management. Um, when we talk about class management, it is not as simple as keeping the class in control during assessment take place. 21st century assessment is more dynamic, where teachers have to make sure that the assessment strategy applied to students, where students um, it will contribute towards the different learning style and behavior of the student, where during the assessment students not easily getting distracted, and they able to be more organized, attentive, focused, and interested during the classroom assessment take place. So when there is a changing towards a strategy uh, in the assessment, the dynamic of the classroom will change, especially in terms of classroom management, and it may be quite challenging for the teacher because applying 21st century assessment is not the same as the traditional assessment. Students are not expected to just become a passive listener anymore. Teacher expects student to be an active participation during assessment. And during the assessment, it is important that students feel they are respected and valued during the class assessment session. In order to deal to this class management during 21st century assessment in the primary language classroom context, it is effective that classroom management require teacher to become patient, plan well, and have different perspective. Teachers should not brush do not brush off students' view and opinion easily. Teacher have to make sure during the assessment, students feel they are heard and understood. Um, Teacher also should able to notice and appreciate a good value, and any bad behavior should be confront respectfully. And creating a 21st century assessment, uh, teachers should create a friendly and open environment in the classroom, because I do believe that students tend to perform better during assessment when the classroom culture doesn't intimidate them. So this is how teacher handle the classroom management during 21st century assessment. Moving on to the fourth issue, which is curriculum, when we talk about 21st century assessment, it is not as traditional as before, where we just need textbook, um, chalk, and talk. The 21st century assessment nowadays is more modern education and demands a dynamic curriculum. So, in order to align 21st century assessment, curriculum need to encompass the content, the competency, and the essential skills uh, of the curriculum that contribute to the assessment. Because the aim is not to only develop student merely to score academically, but we want to develop student overall. And uh, and teacher are also required to create an assessment that is more student centric assessment rather than teacher centric assessment. And it also the assessment of 21st century should also um, focus on students' learning interests and abilities. After all, we try to instill critical thinking, creative, and cognitive thinking, acting as the base for lifelong skill development in the long run. This is what the curriculum need to integrate towards creating the 21st century assessment in primary language classroom. In order to deal with this situation, um, curriculum teacher need to create a curriculum that can integrate uh, many elements. So it is essential to able to collaborate the students and their learning plans and relate it to the classroom assessment. As you can see, as teachers are doing this 21st century assessment, a regularly review is on the effectiveness of the assessment is very important, and student need to receive any update of the assessment if necessary. And the ultimate reason for creating this to deal with this curriculum issue, is we should know that assessment should meet the students' need. That is the ultimate reason. Moving on to the last issue of 21st century assessment, which is global awareness. Um, Creating an assessment is not just to groom students for knowledge, survival, and future careers. But nowadays, our aim as a teacher, uh, creating the 21st century assessment, is to create a future leaders and a global citizens that can adapt and adopt globally, not just in Malaysia, but outside of Malaysia too. It is with a view that an integrated uh, approach to communities and the world alike. Due to this fifth issue, the global awareness, teachers are expected to create the elements of global awareness in their assessment. Some of the criteria of global awareness, such as making students understand um, the environmental issue, social, cultural, political, and economics event in the world. Not just current issues such as COVID-19, for instance, students must also be familiarized with various type of values such as tolerance, empathy, equality, justice, inclusion, hardworking, and many more. This is the issue that how should a teacher collaborate global awareness in the 21st century assessment in the primary language classroom. So, in order to deal with global awareness issue, creativity is crucial. Teachers have to use their creativity approaches in doing this assessment. In order to instill the global awareness in the assessment, a teacher may introduce elements like literature, language, arts, food, culture, and about travel to the students. This is important in order to open their mind to the world out of their classroom. The assessment can be a group discussion over the current events or the news updates, and these are the elements that can be put inside the assessment. Apart from that, teacher also responsible to cultivate the awareness of values such as empathy, fairness, through group discussion or conversation, and through giving examples. This is ways of how teacher deals with global awareness issue in conducting 21st century assessment in primary language classroom context. So, to end my presentation, in conclusion, there are four recommendations for future research and development of assessment of 21st century primary language classroom that I can suggest. First, it is important to more carefully define the 21st century assessment based on students' interests. Second, the purposes of developing a large-scale assessment, it is important to identify the most critical skills, such as focusing on a non-routine problem solving and complex communication. Third, it is important also to define the purpose of the assessment designed to measure the 21st century skill, such as to evaluate the individual student's progress, to focus on the public attention on the educational concern, or to change educational practice by influencing curriculum and instruction. As we can see, different purposes require different sources of evidence to evaluate the validity of the assessment. And of course, the last recommendation would be the computer-based technology that can support the development, administration into scoring a large-scale assessment of the 21st century skills. Um, I guess that is the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening.